There's been quite a lot of talk about bring your own devices and so on. I just wonder, you know, some of it's come out in some of the presentations and so on, but what do you feel about bring your own devices? You know, have you got a particular policy, or does anybody want to make a comment about that?
We piloted my progress with bring your own devices because we didn't have any in a bank, and we've had a polarizing effect in that way. A lot of students love having their own devices. They feel comfortable using it. They know how it works. They don't mind giving it to the mentors. And then, on the other hand, there's students who absolutely hate it, will only use the computer. They don't like handing over their phones or their iPads. So we are getting now a device for the students who do not want to use their own devices, and we're going to give them a choice. So there's pros and cons to bring your own device.
So one of the things that we found as well is that we've basically ran this for our first year, and we do a bring your own device, and it's not just the students that you have to be aware of when you're thinking about bring your own device as well. And the students are used to their own device, but they're handing it over to mentors who are not used to those devices. And I've had a few come back to me and say, I don't like using the system, I'd rather go back to using this and this and this, purely and simply because they're not used to using devices. We encourage our students to have tablets. Most of them just want to use their phones, which are very, very small screens, very, very small for typing on. That's a lesson that we've learned. So we, at the beginning of our next year, can sit with our students and say, we encourage a tablet. Here's why we encourage a tablet. It's not just you that's going to be using this system. You have to think of other people when you're going to be doing this as well. And it is something worth bearing in mind that the staff also have to use these devices too.
I'd actually say, so although we've been very fortunate to be able to provide tablets for our students, it's not a sustainable thing to do. So we will have to go to bring your own devices. But I agree with William, one of the things what we'll do is actually give them criteria. And it won't be, you have to buy an Apple or a Google. It will actually be, it has to have a minimum size of an 8-inch screen, those kind of conditions. Because otherwise it is very, very tricky for the mentors. And actually, we've given 8-inch devices, and our mentors actually still complain, and our students still complain that they're too small. So can you imagine if you're actually on an iPhone? And I think what we do as nurses is very different from medical students. Medical students just tick boxes. For our nurses, you actually have... Oh, sorry, William. Yeah, I'm in a very dangerous position. But actually, there's quite a lot of writing that goes on in the nursing documentation, so there has to be some reasonable type of screen there. And I think the other thing that I'm going to do with Bring Your Own Devices is give some advice on good quality devices. And the other thing that I've actually thought about is we need to inform the students before they start. So a lot of students get purchased tablets as presents before they come to university. So we will... promote it in our interviews for student nurses and say a tablet will be a requirement for your actual course. One of the things we're actually advising is these are the choice of tablets we advise. You can choose it. The other thing is I'd actually say, I actually personally believe that while people harp on about apples, they're a bit of a waste of money in terms of they're not all that they're actually cut out to be. And to be honest with you, I would rather have a £100 tablet in my clinical area than my £450, £500 iPad, to be honest, because if it does go missing, it's less of a... And actually, it's not as desirable. If somebody sees an iPad, sitting around, somebody's going to walk off with it. If you've got an Asus tablet, they might leave it there.
I think my comment is in relation to being poor. I think we are not in a position within RGU at present to supply students with tablet devices, but it's something that I feel very strongly that we should be trying to do, because certainly within our nursing student population, we've got almost 20% that are from MD20, MD40 categories, and that's multiple deprivation index for those of you who aren't aware of that. So I think it isn't fair to expect students, if it is a requisite for the course, to have to purchase that. That's my personal view, and that's why I'm really still trying to fight that at the university strategic level, that we are able to provide either, provide some devices for students who need them, or a way of them hiring or purchasing on a very minimal basis. But I do like the flexibility of the bring your own device, so that students who prefer a particular device are able to, to use that, rather than if they come and they've got their own iPad and they're given an ASUS and they're told that they have to use that, they might not like that, but there's pros and cons for every which way you look. But my real concern is for those who, I've got family, caring issues and all the rest of it, and trying to juggle on, we still have bursaries in Scotland, so they're still trying to juggle on that bursary.
Can I ask another question? Have you found any particular student groups that have found it particularly difficult to engage with the devices? I mean, I work with a lot of mature students as well as some that are sort of, 21, so a whole sort of breadth, and culturally very diverse as well. And I just wondered, with your sort of selection, if there's any that you've specifically found needed extra support.
Well, I think I said earlier in the presentation, the thing that we probably front-loaded, we presumed at the younger age would be more digital friendly with using devices, and that wasn't what we found in actual so far. And I'll ask Shan to comment as well, but what we found is that the older, more mature students have quite fancy iPads and they're using it a lot, and the younger students are more used to using the iPhones, which are very small, and already we're seeing that reflected in the analytics, that it's the iPhones that are being used by the September 2015 cohort, which is has a mixed spectrum of students, but there are a lot of younger students in that, whereas the return to nurse practice, they all were mature students and they all were using the iPads. So I think that's what I've found so far. We will do some research on this. That's our plan, to do that with the cohort we've gone out. We'll go to ethics very soon to try and look at the experiences and try and glean, as I said, that circle of the action research to actually feed forward into the project further.
I think we found that the biggest problem with it was actually students learning how to use the tablets. And on reflection, what we've learned is we need to teach the students how to use the tablet before we teach them how to use the app. So moving forward, we will be teaching students to do things like update apps regularly, knowing how to sync devices, how to connect to Wi-Fi, those kind of skills on the tablets before we actually even talk about the app. Because they get associated with the app and they're not. They're actually digital skills that are needed. And if you don't have them, then you actually struggle. And my advice is don't assume that anybody has those skills. Now, you will find some students do, of course, and they're really whizzy. But a lot of people don't still. Yeah.
Sorry. Did you find any difficulty with translating your paper online achievement record onto the platform?
If I start, and then I'll say what Fiona's experience, what Fiona can actually say what her experience or anybody else was. When I initially, and my students will agree with me here, I think, when I initially translated it on, I did it the same way as it was actually done in the practice document. So I split it up into lots of different documents. We had about 24 or 25 documents. And the issue with that was that the students kept having to flick back and forth. So they may have one document, and then the reflection on was another document. So they'd have to close one document to open another document. And that created a problem. So we've reorganised, and actually we've joined assessments as much as far as possible. So we've got induction documents, formative documents, summative documents, and then a few documents that have to be separate. But I'm still getting feedback from my students. So one of the things at the moment is I put the student pledge is actually meant to be formative, but it's not really. It needs to be in the induction documents with the actual reflective section in the actual summative assessment. They're nodding at me, agreeing with me. So, but the beauty of the system is that it is like a Word document, so you can send it out where one time you can get feedback from the students, and the next time you send it out you can reorganise it. So it is worth, your students actually sending you emails like that and saying, have you thought about rearranging your documents that way?
I
I think one of the biggest constraints we had was that OR Scotland's a set tool. So it's expected no matter what university we go to across Scotland, you see the same experience. So what we had to do is always to be mindful for that. So we didn't have a bit of we couldn't be as creative perhaps as we wanted to. But I think we've done similar to Shan, is try to minimise the amount of forms that are deployed, because that can be very challenging for both the mentor and the student. So we've tried to stay true to the OR Scotland in a digital sort of way. And one example would be is one of the individuals who digitalised it, put a box and said signature, and not thinking this was going to be, there was just a demo one, but you've got to think in a digital manner and people understanding what you're asking for them, because you're asking them in a different way. We found it, originally started doing it with the e-learning team, but actually now it's an admin role, and the admin does it in about a third of the time any of us could do it. So one of our admin staff, and that actually, if you look at lean methodology, it's absolutely a waste of money asking somebody with a technological background to sit and type on a form, when someone with an admin can do it in a third of the time and do it much better, more accurate. So I don't know if that answers our question, does it? Yeah.
Can I just add something? I didn't translate the forms, but Joel and Rosie did, and I think they kept it to the KISS standard, which is keep it simple, stupid. The paper forms had a lot of information on them, and I believe that Joel and Rosie try to take away as much of the information on that form, still keeping it within standards, and putting that, for example, they took the standards off the form, asked the question, and put the standards somewhere else for the mentors to look at, so that it was all still there, but they weren't reading.
You can embed it as a PDF.
Yeah, they weren't embedding. They weren't reading paragraphs and paragraphs of text. They just had to answer the competency, so it is easy to see.
I think that resonated with ourselves, that the mentors asked again and again, can we have a paper copy somewhere? So we've got, similar to Shan, we've got a PDF of the whole document there so they can look at it, because that's what they wanted to see. They wanted to see what it looked like and then go on to the digital. And I think sometimes you've got to do 2 stages for some people. Some people go straight on and they'll be fine, and some will need that to see the visual. It depends what type of learner you are.
Not to be crass and talk about money, but is there a yearly fee to this? Do you pay by licence? How does that work?
So basically, there's an annual licence to use My Progress, and it's based on the number of students using the system. You can have as many staff using it, as many mentors, and so on. But we think that it's the fairest way. So if you start with 100 students, it's X. If you start with 500 students, it's Y or whatever. So, we quote on that. We also provide consultancy services, which Joel provides, and that's helping you set it up exactly the way that you want to and what you want to achieve, and providing the right kind of training for you. We do workshops for administrative staff, for faculty, for students even as well. It's customised according to the customer really, but those are the main things really. And one of the nice things about that model is if you've got more than one department within a university or faculty, it gets cheaper, the price per student, so that's quite attractive. So, and that's happened in a number of places, really.
Can I just add to that?
Yeah, of course.
I think in terms of making a business case for that spend, I mean, because we always have to justify a significant expenditure. It is a significant expenditure, but previous to my role at Robert Gordon University, I worked at Edinburgh Napier, and we did a cost-benefit analysis. We did the paper trail, we looked at the amount of photocopying costs, and actually it was as cheap almost to do this. And it frees staff up from shuffling paper and paper getting sent out to externals and getting lost and things like that. So it frees staff up to do things that they are more highly skilled to do.
I think I've done similar with at RGU, and already even what we post to the externals and portfolios, and I don't know if you know this, I don't know what your area is, but our portfolios are really huge. And I'm external for Anglia Ruskin here. I get a huge box which at a considerable cost, whereas you'll be able to access that right away within days. And already the personal tutors are saying they can, if they're due to be submitted on the 19th, and the 19th they can start accessing it. Whereas, you know yourself, they had to come in, there was those that were late, some are out in Orkney and Shetland and they're allowed to post it, so don't come to the Wednesday. So the personal tutors sometimes didn't get it till the Friday, which if you're going on annual leave, just looking at that, the audit trail is maybe not about monetary, but it's about time management, and it can be significant for an academic if you're waiting to mark these things. So it's not just money cost in i.e. what you're purchasing, it's actually looking at how we work.
It's money in time, isn't it?
Yeah.
It should be waged to time as well.
It's a good point.
I just want to make a comment really. As an education champion here for Anglo-Ruskin University, so I'm a senior lecturer, but as part of my role is I will go and visit students and visit mentors in their practice areas. Having the electronic assessment makes a massive difference, because rather than having to say to the student, right, I'm going to go in that day when you're on that, so I can see your book, so I can see what the problem is. I can look at it from a distance electronically. So I can be in a university knowing what the problem is, and I can sort it out from the university or go into practice. So it makes a big difference in terms of our reputations as universities, because practice can see that we know what the problems are, we're dealing with those problems, we've got this good relationship with our practice, the trust as we've heard today. Also, it means that the students know that we're looking after them, so we're not dislocated from practice, we're there as part of practice, and we are there helping them sort problems out, as well as them knowing that equally we know what's going on, we can be there, we'll actually say to the mentor, well, you haven't done this yet, what's the plan in place to do this, what do you need? So it makes it all work much better together.
I think as well, you don't necessarily have to do as many visits, in terms of if you're to go out to see a student to look at the documents or to see the documents, you could, or your student has to come in to show you the documents. You can look at them online, and then you may not need to. You can actually respond quite easily by email or Skype or anything. Or if you've got to go out and go it. So actually, in some ways, it can, again, for a cost benefit, sometimes reduce the number of visits that an academic or something might have to make. So again, that's a cost saving.
I like the idea today about the moderation. We're not doing that, but there is an idea of, how do we moderate? We moderate within the university. They're all sitting there in piles and people do things, but we can do that much. There are more creative ways that we're not doing. I'm hearing ideas today. And I quite like the idea of this community practice, because I'm hoping within that we can share good practice to share.
I have a question specifically for our student member of the panel. Could you let us know what was, if you were to articulate one advantage of using the system, what would that be? And also perhaps, what you perceive as the most significant challenge, perhaps if you can draw from your experience in the workplace rather than within the university, that would be great.
Time. The mentors can sometimes think formative meeting, oh God, that's going to take up my whole morning because there's so many forms to fill in. So you can actually get a head start on that, and I've done a formative in less than an hour because of how organised it can make the sort of process. With regard to the challenge, it's like everyone's been saying all day, mentors or people's attitude in general to the change. And that's it, really.
In your view, if I may follow this up, in your view, what would be the best way to address this challenge?
Well, the way I've done it is to try and think of what the challenges may be before they come up. So thinking about the keyboard was a way of doing that, and things that not all mentors have been through the training. A lot have, and then they're supposed to spread it. So asking them, do you need any sort of extra support before I get there? And there are bits and pieces that are more difficult to do on a tablet, so having it ready for your mentors. So the service user feedback, for example, it's not always ideal to be on a tablet because you're not going to be there the whole time with your mentor. So if you just give them that one piece of paper, that's all they've got to sort of deal with. So just being proactive, I think.
And I think we ought to give them a round of applause for the